And 100%, it is literally just a pro-ICE segment by Ana. That's what she's doing. There's no critical lens examining the campaign of terror and deportation that ICE is currently engaged in at the behest of Donald Trump and our fascists in control of this country. There's no critical lens. It almost seems like this is, state talking points, like state media. Like, I'm not even kidding. It almost seems like she got the memo to do a show to manufacture consent on behalf of the Trump administration to get progressive-minded Democratic voters to get on board with the idea of ICE basically having complete say over local law enforcement, because that's what this is. It's the federal government coming into local jurisdictions and saying, actually, your police department, your sheriff, we're in charge.
Yeah, 100%. And we can go ahead and plow right into this. Stick around, everybody. We are about to have the Boston City Council president come by our show, Ruti Louis-Jean. She's going to talk to us about the sanctuary city policies and kind of debunk a lot of the things that Ana Kasparian's about to say. Now, we're not going to waste her time probably making her react line by line, so we can plow right into this video. Do you have anything to add from your perspective before we get into this Ana Kasparian nonsense solo hosting the show like she loves to do?
Yeah, I was watching live last night, and this is basically Fox News light, Fox News-esque, whatever you want to call it. It seems like a audition tape that somehow got released to the public, and really embarrassing stuff. I don't know how this got out there.
Where they were pressed on their city's sanctuary immigration policies. Now, this was something that was planned weeks in advance. I was very curious to see how this was going to play out, or more importantly, how these Democratic mayors were going to answer these questions, because I'm going to be frank with you all. There are some concerns with how some of these sanctuary city laws are written. There are grounds for sanctuary city laws, in my opinion, that make sense, especially if we're dealing with a situation in which an undocumented individual is a victim of crime. They should feel comfortable reporting that crime without fear that they will be deported. That is an example of a sanctuary city law that lowers crime. That
sanctuary, but only for snitches in Ana's book.
That is incredibly important. But even though not every sanctuary state or city has the exact same law, some of them are written differently. There are some downfalls based on how some of these laws are written. And it really has to do with the fact that they just don't want to cooperate with, ICE or, the federal government when it comes to undocumented immigrants who have committed other serious crimes. ICE wants to deport them based on how some of these sanctuary city laws are written. The local police do not cooperate with.
Based, huh? How about you say based? How about you say, you know what? Fuck ICE. How about you talk about how it's an illegal agency? How about you talk about how we don't have domestic terrorist spies in this country? How about you talk about how you either operate as a law enforcement officer, which I don't fucking believe in anyway, for just my 2 cents, right? But you know what those law enforcement officers are saying? We don't want these weird spies from the federal government. We don't want these insane gang control individuals coming out here and working above the law and terrorizing our communities and making children feel unsafe. Are you fucking kidding me? There was an 11-year-old kid that killed themselves because of insane bullying and insane fear, okay, of ICE and deportations. That's the kind of hysteria. That's the kind of fear. That's the kind of terrorism that ICE is imposing on people. And yes, thank God, cities like Chicago, cities like Boston have said, we are not collaborating with ICE. I don't care if you're a cop. I don't care if you're a school teacher. I don't care if you're a nurse or a medic. Do not collaborate with ICE. And what Ana is doing is she's sitting here like Laura fucking Ingraham talking about how, oh, they want rapists to stay in jail in Boston and not be deported. Yeah, those people are in jail, i.e. they're off the street. They're not a threat to the people of Boston. And the reason they're not collaborating with the cops to get those people out of here is because then they would have to collaborate with the cops for everyone. Oh, you jaywalked? That means ICE can come and get you. Oh, you sped on your way to work so you didn't get fired? That means ICE can come get you. Oh, you're a day behind on your fucking taxes? ICE can come get you. Do you see how that starts to unravel, Ana? If you had a shred of compassion in your soul, you would have done your homework before you went and spread this bullshit to your audience of people, but you were trying to fence it on an issue that is cut dry and clear.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's ridiculous. And also, like, actually from the perspective of law enforcement, sanctuary cities are a good thing, because that way the law enforcement can actually connect with and talk to the immigrant community, people within the immigrant community. Those people will cooperate with criminal investigations. If they start allowing ICE in and that line becomes blurred, then no one from the immigrant community is going to sit down with any of the police officers, any of the detectives or investigators to cooperate with any investigation, because all they're going to think is I'm immediately going to be deported. Any interaction with not just a police officer, but basically any city or government official will lead to my deportation. That's what you're going to put in those people's minds. So it actually greatly hurts the ability of law enforcement to carry out the investigations and to solve the crimes in the first place. What Anna's doing is just cherry picking instances where, some guy, got out and then committed another crime or something. So now we should all be scared. But that's really what's happening.
Pretty indistinguishable from what Dr. Phil did that we unpacked the other day, where he went on the ICE raid so that they could specifically target a guy that you brought up. Yeah, this guy was a criminal, but he was basically participating in a propaganda effort that was going to catch a lot of guys that were just working the lunch shift and trying to go back home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
ICE or the federal government. And I think that's where the real issue is. And that's what this hearing's about. So I watched, the majority of the hearing today. I was very curious to see if there were going to, there's all these little rhetorical tricks. And it's so frustrating because it should be hyper focused on that one provision that has led to some issues in some cities and states. So with that in mind, the witnesses that were included in this hearing were Eric Adams of New York. Now
and also, I'm sorry to cut in one more time, but I think the elephant in the room is that TYT dedicates no time to the victims of ICE. They dedicate no time to the families that are going to be destroyed. They dedicate no time to humanizing the individuals that live in fear of being terrorized. But she has to hone in on her one little, issue with the wording that keeps people in jail, something she loves. Okay. And she pretends to do so as if she does care about those communities that we just referenced. It's just so pathetic and lame.
Yeah. And I mean, even the way she's introducing this, what do you call it? The Republican grilling of these mayors. What do they call it?
Like a committee hearing?
Yeah, committee hearing. Even the way she's introducing it, like as if it's actually some substantive, expose or whatever. Like, no, this is literally just a virtue signal for Republicans to get a bunch of Democratic mayors together and point their fingers and yell at them and say, you're a criminal because you didn't turn in this immigrant. And it's just theatrical. She's not even pointing that out. She's basically just buying into the right-wing framing of the issue, which is something we increasingly see on the Young Turks with every issue.
He has been far more critical in regard to the sanctuary laws that fall under his jurisdiction in New York City. You also had Mike Johnston of Denver, Brandon Johnson of Chicago, and Michelle Wu, who's the mayor of Boston. Now, the definition of sanctuary city isn't exact, but typically it refers to the policies that limit local cooperation with federal immigration agents and authorities. Okay, so the mayors argued that their policies are crucial for ensuring that undocumented immigrants are free to report crimes and access city services without fear that they're going to be deported. Another example, for instance, is if a woman is undocumented and she's been the victim of domestic abuse, she should feel free going to the authorities for safety. If you don't have any sanctuary laws protecting her, well, then she's not going to go to the authorities and she's going to continue getting abused. So again, I just want to reiterate, in those cases, it makes sense. But when you have provisions that protect undocumented individuals who are literally committing crimes, have been convicted of violent crimes, and have spent time in prison for said violent crimes, it is a problem when ICE reaches out, asks for a detainer, so then they can deport these individuals, and the city doesn't cooperate.
And why might they not do that? Oh, yeah, because they're not cooperating with ICE about anything. Well, Mr. Mayor, Mrs. Mayor, I just want a little bit of we're not cooperating with you. We do not the United States doesn't cooperate with terrorism, right? So I believe all of these mayors are operating well within that threshold. We're not going to engage or honor these requests.
Like Gestapo?
Yeah, fucking a secret police in our society. Do you hear what you're advocating for? Every once in a while, Gavin, we have to get on our high horse and we have to start reminding everybody that there is such thing as a principle, right? It's about drawing a line in the sand, dude. It's about saying, beyond this line, you do not cross. It's called the principle. Okay, build your fucking house on it, because we're not crossing the goddamn line. Okay, do not cooperate with ICE means do not cooperate with. Well, actually, did you know that the people of Boston are paying the taxes that are keeping this deranged criminal from Venezuela alive in a Boston prison? I think we should sacrifice the well-being of your immigrant community so we can get that guy out of our country. And the people of Boston are like, no, we're not going to do that. We feel like we're safe and protected as this man brought away in a cage. And we're not going to sell our entire immigrant community down the river and let cops terrorize them and let secret police terrorize them. Because, if you give the police 1 inch, they will take a fucking mile. And you could about exponentially ratchet that up if you're dealing with a secret police organization like ICE.
Yeah, 100%. And again, it's like this implication is almost that, the mayors are not cooperating with ICE just because they love criminals on the streets of Boston. Like, oh yeah, the mayor of Boston, the mayor of Chicago, they want those criminals on the streets. They want crime in their city. Obviously, that's not the logic. She can't even steel man the case, right? It's just kind of this lazy implication. But in reality, again, oftentimes it's actually the desire of local law enforcement for this arrangement to be the case, because the involvement of ICE, this federal organization, actually impedes their ability to conduct criminal investigations in a way that is that's easy to them or easier to them. It's kind of like, in a movie when the local police is doing an investigation and then the FBI comes into town and the local cops are like, what the fuck? You guys, you big city cops, you don't know what you're doing. You're fucking everything up. You think you have a bigger badge than me so you can conduct the affairs your way. That's kind of how it is on the local level with these cops. Like, they're actually trying to do an investigation, sometimes into illegal crime and illegal immigrant crime. But then ICE comes in and kind of fucks it all up by blowing their cover, essentially, right? Because again, then the cops think, oh, well, if ICE is involved, no one's going to cooperate with us, no one's going to talk to us, because all they think is deportation. That's what they think is going to be the consequence of cooperation.
Yep. Oh, very well said.
And there is evidence to show that is going on. So I'll give you some more insight into that in just a minute. Now, Republicans are accusing these mayors of defying federal law and releasing dangerous criminals into the streets. In fact, I was actually kind of shocked that Michelle Wu, the mayor of Boston, at one point made it seem as though she didn't know that federal law.
This woman, the lawyer, very smart woman. I've been in her office. She doesn't know, actually, Gavin. I don't know if you knew, bro, but maybe she needed Anna to tell her, bro. This woman who's a lawyer and the mayor of a major U.S. metropolis. Hold down, lady. It's Donald Trump is your boss, man, because he's the president. I don't know if you knew that, but you better step aside and let ICE do what they want in your town.
Supersedes state and local laws. That's just the way it works. She seemed to think that local laws supersede federal laws, and that's just not the case.
I bought weed a couple days ago in Kansas City. Pretty sure it's federally illegal. So I don't know.
Yeah, there's a million examples of that. And that's kind of the whole point of our fucking system of government, right? States' rights. Yeah, states. There is a tension between the federal law and the state's law. That's why, we talk so much about freedom in this country, because you can move to a state where certain things are legal that aren't legal federally, right? There is a push and a pull there. So, it's definitely a fine line. But yeah, this is not something new.
Yeah.
Case. Now, much of the questioning had to do with the city's compliance or lack thereof with what is known as detainers. That was what Republicans wanted to talk about here, or immigration holds. So ICE detainers are requests for local law enforcement to hold a defendant with an immigration case or notify the agency if they plan to release them from detention, from prison, so that the Department of Homeland Security has time to assume custody. Now, an immigration hold may be placed after either a random check by ICE officers, who sometimes visit jails and interview inmates, or after being notified by the law enforcement agency detaining the person. Whether the law or local law enforcement agency must comply with the detainer request is a murky issue, with most courts deeming the detainer request to be non-mandatory.
She just shreds her entire argument right there. She's like, well, the reason that somebody like Michelle Wu was saying I'm not following that is because most federal courts will say you don't have to. And the guy that is running our government right now is a deranged fascist, and she's trying to resist the erosion of people's human rights in our country. What's crazy, Gavin, is when you listen to this, you realize that if you are classified as a criminal to Anna, she doesn't care if you have all of your human rights violated. She doesn't care about, equality under the law. She doesn't care about the fact that you're innocent until proven guilty. If they want to have an ICE detainer on you because they spotted you on the street, apparently, Anna thinks that's okay. I guarantee you Anna supports the crazy shit like the Lake and Riley Act, right? Where they're just going to be able to harass and shake down any undocumented person that they see and be like, oh, you're committing a crime. We suspect you of committing the crime of being in America undocumented. Now we have a right to detain and question you. Do you see how fast your civil liberties disappear if you give these people one friggin' inch?
Yep. And 100%, it is literally just a pro-ICE segment by Anna. That's what she's doing. There's no critical lens examining the campaign of terror and deportation that ICE is currently engaged in at the behest of Donald Trump and our fascists in control of this country. There's no critical lens. It almost seems like this is, state talking points, like state media. Like, I'm not even kidding. It almost seems like she got the memo to do a show to manufacture consent on behalf of the Trump administration to get progressive-minded Democratic voters to get on board with the idea of ICE basically having complete say over local law enforcement, because that's what this is. It's the federal government coming into local jurisdictions and saying, actually, fuck your police department, fuck your sheriff, we're in charge, we'll deport whoever we want, we'll take these matters into our own hands. And as we've already seen with this administration, Trump has a big issue with any state that wants to defy his orders. I don't know if we played it on air, but there was that very contentious meeting with him and all the state governors, and he singles out the governor of Maine and scolds her for not following his executive order related to trans people in sports. And he's like, you better follow the order or we're going to cut federal funding off entirely for Maine. We're going to cut you off. So Trump clearly hates the idea of any city, any state standing up to him, standing up to his orders, his dictates, his ordinances, etc. And it is pretty bizarre that instead of pushing back on Trump's attempt to control every state and jurisdiction in a dictatorial way, Anna wants to manufacture consent for it and say, actually, here's some reasons why we should allow ICE to just run roughshod over our communities and over our local law enforcements.
Yeah, absolutely. It's pathetic. And you would be not surprised to see this come out of Laura Ingram's, Megyn Kelly's, any single talking head in conservative media. It's no different. Dr. Phil. This is what the Young Turks has come to. And it's absolute insanity to say that this is coming from a progressive news network. They cannot have the title Progressive News Network. You guys want to, why is all your content about TYT? Because we have to debunk this stupid shit because they say it as if they're progressives and that moves the goalpost. Okay, they are dragging the Overton window back right, and we will not fucking stand for it over here.
Yep, 100%.
So there needs to be clarity on what is constitutional in this case. And if it's murky, well, that's a problem. Because the murkiness is what allows for state and local politicians and officials to just decide, well, we're not going to cooperate with the federal government. And an immigration hold, by the way, I should note, is not a criminal warrant.
Yeah.
So
because there's no fucking evidence required for that shit. Just some racist shithead that looks like a toe and has Oakley sunglasses on, points at a guy who he thinks has a Hispanic accent. Oh, there's too many of you congregating together. Let me see your fucking paperwork. It literally takes us back to fucking East Berlin type shit, Anna. It's nuts.
That is the argument that you'll notice a lot of the Democratic mayors make. If there's a warrant, then yeah, we will cooperate. But if there isn't a warrant, but we're literally talking about people who are already detained, who are already in prison because they have been convicted of carrying out a crime. And carrying out a crime in a blue city, if someone has been imprisoned in a blue city, they committed a violent crime.
Crime is legal in blue cities, Gavin. You can just go to, you probably killed somebody with your bare fucking hands if they give you cash bail. They say, don't even worry about it. Just give us an IOU. We'll get you back on the street. We love murderers in blue cities.
A very violent crime. Let's keep it real. Anyway, so let's keep going. So many of the sanctuary cities do have policies preventing local law enforcement from complying with the detainers. For example, I'm going to give you a statistic that's important here. So in 2023, ICE issued 109 immigration detainers to the New York Police Department. Remember, this is under the Biden administration. So under Biden, New York City received 109 immigration detainers. They were not honored at all. because
Because they have said a million fucking times we're not collaborating with ICE. Yeah, Anna, that's a good thing. That is a good thing. Based New York City. If you're gonna get me and Gavin to say something nice about New York City and the fucking cops, you're gonna have to look really, really hard. But she found it. And it's the fact that they're not working with ICE.
This is literally just a segment where she's doing Republican propaganda, guys. She's doing Republican propaganda. She's literally doing a segment where she scolds Democratic mayors for not cooperating sufficiently with ICE. Like, that's what this is. There's no other way to spin it. That is what this segment is.
NYPD is told that, you got to follow through with these city laws, and the city laws have sanctuary status. So Chairman James Comer pressed all of the mayors on whether they would turn over criminals to ICE based on a detainer. And none explicitly answered the question. They answered the question, but they didn't explicitly answer yes. And I think that's an issue. So let's take a look.
They answered the question all right, just not the way I wanted them to.
Last year, in a Boston suburb, an illegal alien
This is the guy Anna is cheering for, by the way. Listen to him talk.
raped and impregnated his 14-year-old daughter while living in a shelter for illegal aliens. Mayor Wu, under Boston law, would you turn this criminal over to ICE on a detainer?
Whenever there's a criminal warrant, Boston police enforce that and hold people accountable.
So would you turn that criminal over to ICE?
This happened outside the city of Boston, but I can tell you in the city, whenever someone commits a crime, whenever there's a criminal warrant, we hold them accountable. If ICE deems that they are dangerous enough to obtain a criminal warrant, and the Boston police will enforce it.
Will you turn that criminal over to ICE?
We follow the laws.
I
And
take
we
that
make
as a no.
sure-
Mayor Jones?
I love that too. I love it when people use the criminal court protections to their own benefit. Like that lady repeats the line that her attorneys, whoever the hell she spoke to, was like, "Go ahead and say this every time they ask you that question." She's like, "Got it. Just gonna repeat myself until this guy loses his mind on camera."
Johnson, under Chicago law, would you turn this criminal over to ICE on a detainer?
Our local law enforcement works hard every day to get criminals off the streets of Chicago.
Would you
And
turn that criminal over to ICE?
with a criminal warrant from the federal government, our local law enforcement repeatedly collaborates with federal agents.
Not a good look. Not a good look. I need to understand, and I know people are gonna get real mad at me because for some reason it's somehow difficult to differentiate between the vast majority of immigrants and the small percentage of those who are here illegally and are committing crimes. I know it's so hard to make that distinction, but guess what? For me,
It's who's not making that distinction is the fucking Trump administration. Is the Republicans. They're the one calling for mass deportations. That's not just of fucking violent criminals and mass rapists. That means of all illegal immigrants, Anna. That's what they want to do. They're the ones that don't make that distinction. You think mass deportations means a targeted mission to remove 0.03% of the most violent immigrant? No. It means normal ass people getting fucking terrorized by ICE and then them using examples of arrests of really violent bad people like the Dr. Phil thing to manufacture consent for it and make it seem like that's everyone that's getting rounded up, when in reality, no. It's mass deportations. They're the ones failing to make that distinction.
Yeah, what Anna doesn't understand, I guess, or doesn't want to understand, or has never sat down and Googled once in her entire life, is that ICE isn't very old. It's like 25 years old. I'm older than ICE, right? I believe ICE was developed by George fucking Bush.
Yep.
Okay, one of the many things that man did that was criminal. And before then, Gavin, I know you know this. I guess Anna probably doesn't. Before then, if you were convicted of a crime, part of your punishment could be that we were going to send you back to wherever the fuck you came from. So let me give you a harmless example of a guy named Lucky Luciano, okay? That guy, very involved in dividing New York up into the 5 families of the Costa Nostra.
Luciano.
When he was done with his first fucking sentence, right, they sent him back to Sicily, right? And then he had to go through Cuba to do his business with America, because he basically got banned from coming back to America, right? They weren't going to stamp his passport ever again.
Edward Snowden style.
Yeah, well, sure. And so that's when he started all the Havana stuff, and that was why that became a mob headquarters for a long time. There were plenty of reasons long before ICE that if you were a criminal that had been convicted of a crime and tried before a jury of your peers and convicted, that, yeah, deportation was on the table for the most hardened, convicted criminals, right? You didn't need an agency like ICE. And that's why all of these mayors sit up there and say, you know what, if the federal government wants to go through the trouble of meeting the criteria that is required to charge somebody with a warrant, then they're welcome to, and we would follow through with that. But what we're not going to do is allow a secret police to undermine everybody's civil liberties and then collaborate with them in the streets of Boston. We're not going to do that. That's why they're not presenting warrants, because they want to undermine and erode people's liberties that we give to everyone if you are standing on the dirt that is America. They're trying to shred that. They're trying to erode that. They're trying to turn people into tiered citizens. And we can't stand for that. And that's why all of these mayors are saying absolutely the fuck not.
Yep, 100%.
Me, it's not that hard to make that distinction. So if someone's in the country illegally and they are currently in prison because they committed other violent crimes, please explain to me how it's a good look for these Democratic mayors to refuse to answer with the affirmative. Yes, yes, someone who has raped their 14-year-old daughter is someone who should be deported after they serve their time in our prison system. So yes, in those cases, we do comply, we do work with the feds. Why is it so hard to say that? I need someone to give me a real freaking answer, right?
Because they haven't gotten a warrant, and if they did, then they would comply. Anna, there's your fucking answer.
Yeah, the mayors actually did explain that if you actually listened. And again, like, it's annoying that, you know, because I understand Anna, she doesn't want to be a progressive anymore. Okay, whatever. You don't have to make this segment fucking progressive propaganda. That's not what we're saying. But could you at least actually examine the situation in a fair and nuanced way? Like, at very least, if you want to come at this, I'm a real reporter now, I'm not an activist anymore, I'm not on the left. Okay, well, can you at least give a sufficient explanation, like a steel man of the case these mayors are making, instead of just like pearl clutching and finger wagging at them for not saying yes or not saying no or whatever the fuck she wanted them to say, right? Like, can't you at least try to explain to your audience of supposed progressives why the mayors are trying to stand up to the federal government in this instance and why they view it as necessary for the sake of their city and their city's law enforcement? Like, because there is a case there. It's not just this stupid, like, oh, we love criminals and we want them on the streets, like she's implying. There obviously is a fucking case, as we've done our best to explain. But this is just propaganda.
Yeah.
Now, but no one gives me an answer because everyone wants to conflate these violent criminals, who again represent a tiny percentage of immigrants, with all immigrants. And that's ridiculous. They're not the same. They're not the same. Just like the general population in the United States, there is a small percentage of people who end up committing violent crimes.
Yeah, and those people still have rights. They still have the right to due process. They still have the same civil liberties as you and me. And guess what? When people in sanctuary committees commit crime, it's not the freaking purge, bro. Okay, they didn't legalize crime in Boston and Chicago. Okay, you don't have people, where they legalized crime was freaking Wall Street. Okay, that's where they legalized crime, but we don't hear Anna talking about that anymore. Where they legalized crime was Silicon Valley, about 6.5 hours north of where Anna records her freaking podcast. You know what I'm saying, everyone? Okay, that's where crimes have been legalized. She can't even be like, they won't pick these people up off the street. She's like, they're housed in jail cells. It's like, yeah, dude, that's because they committed crimes that were violent, and then the police came and arrested them, and they were like, yeah, you can't be on the streets in a free society. You just raped and killed your own kid. Yep. That person we have to remove from the streets for a time.
Yeah, crazy shit to take this moment and just like fucking contribute to the anti-immigrant fear mongering, the chorus of propaganda for ICE. This is what you want to do as a political commentator. This is the sentiment you want to contribute to, instead of pushing back on in any meaningful way or resisting, or at least even just providing the counterbalance explanation towards for the sake of your audience. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But nope, Fox News wannabes.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And it's false advertisement. It's deranged that you would, consider this a progressive take on the matter. I mean, it is the most regressive take on the matter. It is, as we've said ad nauseum, something that would come out of Ann Coulter's mouth. Okay, it's pretty ridiculous, but we're actually really excited. We're very enthused. we are going to get to hear from, the Boston City Council president, and we'll ask, this is a fearless podcast. If they've legalized crime in Boston, we're going to be the first ones to find out. You know what? I might have to move there. I'll take my chances. I'll roll the dice. I'm into the occasional get rich quick scheme. You know what? Jesse James style, make my way in and out of Boston. Be the reverse carpet bag. It'll be a very, successful maneuver. Anyway, here to join us, debase ourselves a little bit by coming on our humble little podcast, Boston City Council President Ruti Louis-Jean. Ruti, thank you so much for taking the time.
Hi, so happy to be back with y'all. Thank you for having me on again. I know that's a really busy time, and I'm happy to be just, talking to y'all. So thank you.
Of course. I guess the elephant in the room here, right? It's been making headlines. The mayor of Boston was just, brought forth in front of, like a congressional committee, had to talk about sanctuary cities. And if you could just briefly summarize the Boston's policy as it comes to sanctuary cities, what is the fact from the fiction? Are you guys just allowing criminals to run lawlessly all throughout your town? Is it the purge over there?
Zach, it is not the purge here. We are the safest big city in the country. And that is in part because of the relationship that law enforcement has with our immigrant communities where there is trust. So we in the city of Boston passed the Trust Act in 2016, and it was amended. And our council last December, upon the election of Donald Trump back to the White House, we reaffirmed our commitment to the Trust Act, which states that local law enforcement will be involved in enforcing local laws, regardless of immigration status. That's what our job is. Our job is to make sure that we are guarding against crime that's happening here in our city, regardless of immigration status. And as we heard yesterday, there's data that supports the fact, and Cato Institute talked about this, our mayor talked about this, that immigrants are actually more likely to report crimes and they are less likely to commit crimes. And so here in the city of Boston, by ensuring that our local law enforcement are spending their time on local laws, we are building a safer city.
Yeah, well, really appreciate that insight, and welcome to the show again. It's great to have you on. Thanks for your time. We were talking a little bit about that, right? How ICE actually kind of runs roughshod over the local law enforcement in a city like Boston when they want to come in and just kind of override the way things are done locally. Can you talk a little bit about that? How it's actually sometimes in the best interest actually of the police and the law enforcement in any given city, Boston included, to kind of do things their own way, to handle these investigations with the community and the immigrant community without a federal organization coming and intervening?
Well, local law enforcement, our job is local law, right? Our Boston Police Department, they are not entities of the federal government. They are not agents of the federal government. And so their relationship is to our city and is to our residents. The 10th Amendment is an anti-commandeering, prevents us as a city from doing the work of the federal government in this instance. And so where ICE wants to, get involved in deportations, they and the federal government and their agents can do so. Now, there can be cooperation in the event that ICE has received, has issued a criminal warrant against someone who is currently in custody of the Boston Police Department. But other than that, the interactions are limited.
Why, and this is something that we've been kind of dispelling and pushing back often, but I want to ask you because it's something that conservative pundits will say all the time. They'll say, why won't Boston PD, why won't Chicago PD, why won't Mayor Wu, Mayor Johnson, whomever, just force the PD to work with ICE when it comes to extreme examples? And then, of course, they'll find the most heinous motherfucker who ever lived that wasn't born in America, and they'll be like, see, we have to send that guy out of the country and everybody else's civil liberties be damned. So, what would be a response to a concerned voter who's like, why aren't they, prioritizing, or why aren't they, wiggling the line between collaboration with the federal government when it comes to these extreme cases when, they could find somebody that we would all agree made horrible choices?
And in these extreme cases, the ICE is capable of getting a criminal warrant signed by a judge to require the detention of that person in cooperation from the Boston Police Department. So there are mechanisms for that to happen. What we're saying, and what the mayor said consistently, is that our priority is the safety of our residents, regardless of their immigration status. And so it's critically important that, you know, our law, you know, our law department, our police officers are focused on our local laws. Federal issues, you know, civil deportations are within the purview of the federal government. You know, we are talking about needing police officers for, you know, some of our more events that we're trying to do here in the city of Boston, or more public safety issues, right? That, you know, oftentimes there are discussions about, do we have enough police officers? You know, do we need to think about where we're distributing our police officers? Never mind trying to take on the role of the federal government. We have our own work to do and our own work to be concerned of. And so I think, you know, there's a misunderstanding of what the Trust Act is and what it isn't. It's just stating that our law enforcement are not going to be involved in any civil deportations. If there are situations of egregious crime happening, then the ICE can get a criminal warrant and ensure that that person can be held. There are also circumstances under which there is sometimes engagement with ICE's Department of Homeland Security investigation division that deals with issues of human trafficking and drug smuggling. So this idea that there's this blanket non-interaction is incorrect. What is correct is that in cases of civil deportations, our police officers will not be involved.